I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
And I'm Edison. Y'all better grab your extra large popcorn. We are in the thick of things with great films.
I am open and positive.
I don't like it.
Let's throw on these boxing gloves.
Let's do it.
Let's fucking do it.
Welcome to Talk Movie to Me, a weekly podcast where we do a deep dive on a new release that's just hit theaters or streaming. I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
And I'm Edison. And y'all, this episode is one that we have been waiting for.
For so long.
Yes. This movie feels like more than a movie. It feels like an event. It's one that we've been anticipating for so long. So, listeners, are you ready for some desert drama? Because we can only be talking about one film. And I think y'all know what it is. We are going to dive into the swirling sands of Dune Part 2.
Woohoo! Desert power, baby!
Directed by Denis Villeneuve, this film stars Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, and just so many others. The sequel picks up right where its predecessor left off, but where Dune Part 1 was all about setting up the chessboard, this time the pieces are fighting for a checkmate. Here in Arrakis, where destiny dances on the edge of a crysknife, we continue the story of Paul, scion of the House of Atreides. He and his mother Jessica are continuing to live among the Fremen, learning their ways. But the weight of fate is heavy. Could Paul be the Lisan al-Gaib, the prophesied messiah of Fremen lore, the voice from the outer world, destined to become a savior to the people of Arrakis, freeing them from colonial oppression and returning the land to a green paradise? The seeds of faith that the Bene Gesserit have planted are starting to take root, and some of the Fremen say yes, he could be the one, the Mahdi, but he himself is not so sure. Lady Jessica, however, has faith, and embraces her own destiny with a drink of fluorescent blue worm piss, the lethal water of life, unlocking a lineage of memories and returning from the brink of death as a powerful Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit. Also, the Harkonnens have retaken control of the spice, but as Paul and the Fremen disrupt the harvest, spice production is not at the level it needs to be, and a new Harkonnen rises to power. Oh, but it's not all horror, dear listeners, for love blossoms amidst the dunes. Paul, now given the Fremen names Usul and Muad'Dib, finds love with the fierce warrior Chani, despite what I have to assume is incredibly poor hygiene due to an entire lack of water on this desolate planet.
Oh my god, so stinky.
It's very
Terrible,
true.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all I could think about. That sex scene, I was like, really? Anyway, this movie has it all. Intrigue, battles, prophecies, witches, lust, love, laughter. It even has Christopher Walken. So grab your stillsuit and spice melange, people, because we're about to hitch a ride on a giant sandworm and embark on a journey through the treacherous deserts of Arrakis. This is Dune Part 2.
Woohoo!
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. First impression, Helen.
Well, I went back and I listened to part of our episode from the first Dune movie today and was reminded how that one opened with dreams are messages from the deep. And we have a very similar opening with this film with a quote over black screen, power over spice is power over all.
I believe what it said was...
You said that in the last episode too. You made the same joke.
Shit.
Yeah, and I liked that we have that through line when it comes to the openings. And truthfully, I was really excited to see this movie. I saw it today, actually, which, funny enough, is what I did in the last episode, too. Saw it the day of.
At least we're predictable together.
Yeah, right. And I was along for the ride. I strapped myself in, and I was ready.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Sinclair?
Ugh. I've just been so excited for this. A couple weeks ago, I saw the trailer one more time in the theater, and I started to weep. I was just so excited to see this movie. I did think we were going to be seeing it in, December? Mm-hmm. But because of the strike, we had to wait, and just so happy that, we got to see it now. Yeah, so this is a bit different when it opens because instead of having a voiceover from the character of Chani, played by Zendaya, we're hearing and we're being introduced to Florence Pugh as the Princess Irulan. So I was very excited to know that she was going to be in this movie because she was absent in the first part. So it was really cool to kind of have the movie start with her. I did have to take a couple minutes to familiarize myself again because I actually didn't go back and watch the first movie. I saw it twice when it came out and I haven't watched it since. So I read the second half of the book. So that kind of helped me reintroduce myself to what was going on too. You know, the body was coming out and I'm like, oh, okay, right. That's Jamis. That's who Timothy Chalamet, that's who Paul had to fight. But it did take me a minute to just familiarize myself with what was going on.
Sort of place yourself back on Arrakis.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Not me. I actually went, they did a re-release of the first film at IMAX's a couple of weeks ago, and I went to see it again, which was, I think, my 5th or 6th time watching the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was incredible. Yeah, my excitement was huge for this too. I have somehow avoided the trailers. I know that they're there. Yeah, and I've been...
Why? How?
Through great embarrassment to those around me who have attended any movies at the theater with me. I went to see The Color Purple with my friend Shawnee and her parents, and there was like I'm telling you, a 3-minute trailer for this film, and I had to sit with my legs up and my ears plugged humming.
Aww, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I did not want to see it. I knew that I wanted to see the film, and I just didn't need to see anything about it. And for me, that gave me even more anticipation. Yeah, anyways, I was losing it with excitement to see this film. I've seen it twice already in theaters. That opening scene, I really liked Florence Pugh. I like being introduced to the princess, right, the Emperor's daughter there, Irulan. I kind of like that she's keeping this journal. It's like, and she's curious. She's saying, okay, what happened there on Arrakis? What, you know, how did the Harkonnens obliterate House Atreides in one night? And she's kind of putting the pieces together. But really, for me, it was the immediate next opening scene, like where we see the Harkonnen soldiers on the sand approaching Paul and Jessica and that whole and the Fremen, and it's like, oh, we're getting right into the action right away. And I knew that that's what this film was going to be because the first film was setting it all up. But I was really excited to just be like right into it.
Well, should we get right into it?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Let's get right into it. I think we have to start by flat out saying, like, we have been talking about this film. We talked about it in our most anticipated episode this year and also in our most anticipated last year.
Yeah.
I think we need to just start out by saying, like, what, and I'm so curious. Like, we all had high expectations. Did this film meet those expectations? What did you think?
I mean, I know you both loved it already.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my review on Letterboxd is just a skull and bones because I just died right there in the theater.
Yeah. I really, really liked this. I think I actually liked it better than the first one, to be honest.
Yeah. You weren't as hyped as we were about the first one.
No,
I
did like it, but sci-fi is not necessarily my favorite genre, so I don't connect to it as strongly, I think, as the two of you. But I really, really liked this. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I don't know that I could have gone in with any higher expectations, and I usually hate to do that because it only leads to a world of disappointment, but it did not. It like superseded somehow. Like I was literally floating on a high when I left this film both times.
I love that. So Sinclair, you have read the book. I know there's multiple books, but so is there anything that like really stood out to you in terms of things in the movie being very different from the book, or was it super similar? Like how did they compare?
Excellent questions, Helen.
And
I'm glad you're asking because I read this book for the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I read the first part of it for Dune Part 1, and I did state that I would read the other half of this book before Part 2 came out. Now, mind you, I waited years. Like, what was it, 2 years between? Yeah.
Yeah.
You've read about 300 other books in that time.
Yeah.
Yes. And so just a couple weeks before this was to be released, I was like, oh, shit, I better get going on that. So there are some really noticeable differences. I think that instead of listing all of them, as we talk about storytelling, I'll probably just mention a few here or there. But basically, just for some context, for anyone who doesn't know, Dune is a book by Frank Herbert. It was written in 1965. This is the greatest selling sci-fi book of all time.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
This is very beloved. And so Frank Herbert, before he died in 1986, he wrote 6 books. And then his son actually took on the Dune universe and continued writing. There's about 23 novels.
Oh my God.
So largely, overall, would you say it's a pretty faithful adaptation? Obviously, there's going to be some changes, but okay.
It is. And one of the biggest things right off the bat is that Chani is doing the voiceover in part 1. Mm-hmm. Really, in Dune, it's Princess Irulan doing her journals at the beginning, reading excerpts of this history.
Okay.
At the beginning of every single chapter. So this actually finally introduces her as somebody who narrates this stuff, but also you don't physically meet the princess until later on in the book as well. So that's pretty faithful. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I just also need to say I don't like the book. I don't. Okay. You can come after me, I guess. But I actually think the movie improves upon so many things that I didn't like about the book. For sure.
I think the most common criticism of the first film, even by people who really liked it, I think, was that it was maybe a bit slow or, even a bit dull. That was not my take. Obviously, I was obsessed with that movie, but I could appreciate that as a critique. This film, the pacing, the narrative structure of it is entirely different. There's so much more happening in this film. There's so much more happening in terms of character development. There's so much more so many more action set pieces and sequences. It's like there's just way more. And it makes sense. We had, almost 3 hours building this whole world, and now we get to kind of dive into the middle of it. What did you think about that? Did you find it a smooth adjustment, or did you find it jarring in any way?
I mean, I didn't remember the first one being less action-packed, although I did actually come home after watching part 2, and I started watching part 1 again today. Yes. And I did notice that this is more exposition, and it is more world building and less actionable beats than part 2. I really loved the way that part 2 was structured. And I remember us saying this about the first one, but it's such a feat to adapt the story. It's insane. And the way that he has adapted part 2, I think is incredible, so masterful. It made sense to me. I had to pay attention. There was bits where I was like, okay, I'm a little rusty on these, who everybody is, but it moved in a linear way that was super cohesive. And it's 2 hours and 45 minutes. I could have sat in the theater for another hour.
Same.
And coming from you, Helen?
Never say that.
Never say that. Wow.
So the pacing really worked for me, for sure.
What I loved was that it despite it being so much there's a lot in this. We're watching the main character go from a kid to an emperor god. We're seeing all of this happen. Despite that, Denis Villeneuve still manages to find still quiet moments where it can linger. Think about when Stilgar tells Paul he's going to do his first test and he's going to cross the desert, and you just have that beautiful little montage or moment where Chani is teaching him how to sandwalk properly. That's a slow, quiet, calm moment in the midst of all of this. Or then when the enormous worm is coming and he's got to ride it and he's just walking along the sand dunes at the top looking out over the ridge. They spend a full 90 seconds just with him walking back and forth, just looking out. It's the anticipation and the space that he gives to it in the midst of all of this. It's just brilliant.
Well, and you have to build the world too without this isn't Star Wars where they go into this bar and you see all these different creatures and different aliens and that, this is kind of staying with these groups of people, really kind of just staying in it. You're not seeing the entirety of the world, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think in comparison to other sci-fi epics, there's such a human element to these stories, and he does give that breathing room to digest what you're witnessing. It makes it really relatable, and I think that that's where I enjoy this a lot more than other sci-fi entities, because I'm like, oh, this is such a human story, and it feels really real. Like, it doesn't feel like in a galaxy far, far away, like it feels like I could see how humanity could get to this point.
Yeah, so, in terms of him kind of like rising to power, I think a big complaint is that, this happens like really fast. But I do think that having the character of Chani's a better character in the movie than she is in the book, for sure.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
She is. She's just better. And
I read that all the female characters are better.
Oh, 100%.
Denis Villeneuve like really builds them
Even
out.
the princess has more to do in this than she does in the book.
Right.
But having Chani kind of be that skeptical non-believer in him, I thought made this really work. Like, there had to be some friction there with Paul. I feel like, I don't want to say things come easy, but I feel like people get on board with Paul right away, so I liked that they had that friction there, especially coming from her. I think that made her character so much more interesting.
It also let me actually buy into the romance.
Yeah.
And they have really great chemistry with one another. They're both really good actors and beautiful humans and all the rest of it. But like, having that friction is so important because you need a conflict, and it's a conflict that's rooted in values and in something bigger than either of them, and it's pretty big. And I think in that, the truth is it's kind of difficult. I don't know what happens in the next books. I really don't. It's kind of difficult to imagine a world where they can actually have a relationship with one another. She's so grounded. He's a literal emperor, like godlike figure. I don't know how it could possibly work. And so there's an inherent like tragedy in the fact that you really don't see how it could ever work out for them. And that's really powerful when you're watching them fall in love with one another as characters.
Yeah. And I think to speak to, people getting on board with him, if that feels quick, these people have been told forever that somebody's coming for them.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that makes it believable that they would say, oh, you're the one. Like, this is what we've been waiting for.
Yeah. And I think Jessica does push it, too.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
She's a bit of a stage parent.
A bit. The scene where she's in the temple and she's like, they look weak. Let us prey on them first. They'll believe it.
Wow. Like, she's
Yeah.
such a stage parent.
Yeah. That's really funny.
And I love, too, that Paul is a bit unsure of himself, but then he drinks the blue Kool-Aid and he kind of buys into his own hype as well.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
one of the themes that I really loved in this movie is that idea of, questioning prophecy
Yes.
and questioning Messiah. And the character of Chani has that great quote where she says, the prophecy is how they enslave us.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the whole time, like, is it real? Or is he just doing all the right things to get to this position?
And I think why it works for him as a character is because he is also literally confronted with that. Right up until the moment when he actually does drink the worm poison.
Yeah.
And I think then legit has been given these visions and whatever. But up until then, he is also asking himself, like, wait a minute, am I part of this prophecy, or am I just a pawn? Am I just dancing on strings played by the master puppeteers, the Bene Gesserit? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
Well, and it's really, really hard with this one because this is a world where he does drink poison and does come back, right? And Zendaya or Chani does have these tears that bring him back. So you're like, okay, well, there is some sort of supernatural element that
For sure.
that is going on. So yes, maybe he could be.
But it
sure.
also, I also don't necessarily believe that means that there is prophecy. I think it also could just be the Bene Gesserit, like, they are puppet masters. They are pulling strings, and like, sure that you could say it's prophecy, but also maybe it's just them orchestrating something
100%,
and making you believe it's prophecy, and that's why you do it.
And the film keeps that open for us. You see them, the actions taken, like even Jessica, when she goes to drink the worm poison, she's not going to until the old Reverend Mother says, drink. And then Chani is just cursing her out and saying, you deal with this, until she says, do it. And Chani has to then act, right? So there's moments where we see the action is propelled literally by the force of the Bene Gesserit power, by their manipulation. So
maybe the worm poison is just a powerful drug too, and maybe some people actually can survive it.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
It's cool because when you're dealing with big themes like this, like about prophecy and Messiah and whatever, I think as a culture now, we're just largely beyond, if we're going to watch this in a film, we need it to be a little bit more abstract and a little open to interpretation in order to connect. And this film does that really well.
Yeah.
So in this part, we are introduced to the fetus.
Yeah.
Paul's sister, Lady Jessica, is pregnant. She has the blue worm poison drug and goes through this Reverend Mother process, but they don't realize that she is pregnant. This actually causes the fetus to advance beyond. Like, the fetus gathers all the power of a Reverend Mother in this process. And basically in the book, she gives birth to Aaliyah, and Aaliyah is a child and is this like child. Everyone considers her an abomination. She has all these powers. She's just a little weirdo. And it's actually her that kills the Baron. It's not Paul.
Oh.
So she's like this kind of like freakish child. She gets kidnapped by the Harkonnens. Paul and Chani have a baby. The baby is killed by the Harkonnen army. And this all happens, I swear, in like a couple pages of the book. They're just like, okay, they had a child. The child's dead. Alia's a kid. Like, she's been kidnapped. And she has this like Arya Stark moment where she's the one that kills the Baron. And they had Paul do it, which makes more sense.
It makes so much more sense, certainly in the context of a film that you're trying to tell all this story.
You need to see him kill the Baron.
Yeah.
Like, it's so anticlimactic in the book. I was like, she kills him? No, Paul needs to kill him. And then in the movie, I was like, yes.
And there's no time. This film already has so much. We can't just like suddenly have her being a whole other character we have to really like invest in.
Yeah.
It's enough that she's speaking through Jessica, and we get that one clip of Anya Taylor-Joy as her, you know, as an adult. That's cool. But
and they're just kind of setting it up, I think, for if they do a third one. They obviously don't want this character to be a child. They want it to be when Aaliyah is, you know, older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of our favorite scenes?
Oh my God.
The Harkonnens. Every single Harkonnen moment, every single moment with Fade Rotha. For me, I had to choose my bathroom breaks very wisely because I had to pee twice during this, and I knew my moments. I was like, okay, they're going to give him his name. He's going to be Kangaroo Mouse. Okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom here. And then the other moment I went to the bathroom was when he's reunited with Gurney Halleck. I was like, okay, like that's when I'm going, because I did not want to miss a single moment with the Harkonnens.
Yeah, that gladiator scene.
Incredible.
Yeah.
That's like one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a movie.
It was just so overwhelming. Every single detail, their black sun, the like splashes of oil on the shield that are meant to kind of be like fireworks, the utter stark like black and white of it all, but like the brightest white. And Fade Rotha, like Austin Butler as this character. I mean, we have to talk about Fade Rotha. We'll
I know
talk about
you
that
have
in
the hots
performances.
for him. You have the hots for
I really don't wanna.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I know. Now, my question for you, though, is do you think that the attraction is coming from the fact that you know it's Austin Butler? Like, if it was, like, maybe a newcomer we didn't know who it was, I know you would be like, look at his luscious lips. Like, I know you would think that no matter what actor it was. But do you think part of it comes from the fact that, like, we know it's Austin Butler?
I don't know. I truly don't know. But that he was that character. And I think it was intentional. And okay, we're jumping ahead into performances with this, but that's fine. I think that he intentionally played it like, okay, violence is orgasmic to me. So he was infusing sexuality into this whole performance, and it just was hot. It was hot.
Well, he's very sexually driven, and like when Lea Seydoux' character seduces him, or like we get, she says that she's like, oh, these are his motivations.
That's right. Yeah. But I agree. The Harkonnen, all those scenes with them are amazing. That final fight scene between Paul and Phaedratha, backlit by that sun, like I love that it was just like felt real, like it felt like a real fight,
and the choreography was incredible in that fight.
The fight choreo was insane.
Really. I couldn't get over the introduction to that character in that fight scene, that gladiator like fight scene, because visually you kind of know already what part 2 is going to look like after seeing part 1, and I love that they gave us something that looked completely different from Arrakis, from anything that you saw in part 1. This was a completely different look, and what we saw when it was on Getty Prime, when you saw the Harkonnens, this was a completely different look from that as well. We got to see this fight under this black sun, and it was just a completely new experience that we didn't get in the first one. I wasn't expecting that at all. Like, I saw black and white images in the stills and stuff for this movie, the teaser stuff, but I had no idea it was going to be that cool.
Same. And it's so smart from a filmmaking perspective, because it's entirely unexpected, and it's something that is just entirely different visually. You've got a 2-hour and 46-minute film, and you've got 10-15 minutes of it that is just like its own film within a film. That is brilliant. I loved that.
Is it written like that, Sinclair, the world, or was that?
I did not read it like that at all.
Okay.
At all. That was his vision.
It truly feels like true imagination.
Yes.
Come to life, which is so cool.
Yeah.
When Timmy learns how to ride the worm, that was one of my favorite scenes as well.
Jaw-dropping.
Now, I can see there being some complaints maybe that you don't see the worm like jump out of the sand like it's some sort of humpback whale or something. But
it's too big for that.
I loved that because like this isn't Tremors. This isn't, Beetlejuice. We're not going to see some big CGI'd worm like coming out like a humpback whale. I liked how real it looked, and it felt like it would be an actual creature that could exist. How you see it under the sand, and like just the little bits of it.
That scene captures exactly the key of what this world that Denis Villeneuve has built, is why it's so successful, is because it feels so real. That whole thing is, it's like the struggle is for him to like hook this little thing and get up off his knee. He's just trying to stand up on this and going through these sand dunes, and it's so intense, and that's the soaring score and all of it. Like I had tears streaming down my face when he like stood up. It was so epic. So epic.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, I have been thinking about them riding the worm since watching this. And at one point they kind of ride them into battle. It's like they kind of like hitch a ride on them, Yeah. How do they get off them? Like, and how do some other people also get on them? This is a pointless question, but at the same time, something I did think about. Like they kind of ride them into battle, and it's like, do you think like the worms knew? Like, did they know? Hey, we're like horses riding into battle.
Yes, think of them like a giant horse. They're a giant horse. They know what's happening. They're probably smarter than horses.
But does everybody run and jump on it like in Little Miss Sunshine when they're running along the van and they jump in the car? Is that like how the Fremen get on the worms?
I was thinking it when they were transporting Jessica in the like, how did they get her little like wicker cabin onto the back of it? But we don't ask these questions.
I do believe that the Fremen have not control, but they have a connection to the worms.
Yeah.
They understand each other because they come from the same place. It's like they are the desert people and these are the desert creatures, and they can work together.
Yeah.
That's how I interpret it.
I think it's the only way really to
it is the only way
to believe that as something.
One other theme that I just really it really made me think was just the idea of native or indigenous peoples to lands and how colonization uses these people for their resources. And how that that is our world. That is what has happened in our modern world, and you're seeing it again 10,000 years into the future, but how these people are being exploited. And the idea of power and transferring power, and like you want to imagine that things are going to get better if Paul is in power, but it really, the way that I felt at the end of this is like they're all bad. Anyone with that much power is going to be bad. It's hard to imagine hope when that much power rests in one person's hands, and
he knows it. And I think that's been his plight through this whole film. And I think you're totally right. It's like, this is a story about power. The quest for power seems to have to come on the backs of somebody else's oppression. Whether it's the indigenous people of a place like the Fremen, or whether it's an entire, universe worth of people. If Paul becomes leader, who knows, right? But it is a really interesting concept and theme that this film is definitely exploring for sure. And I don't know what happens in the third film. I do know that, or in the third story, I do know that there's like a time leap of 12 years. And I think that it's a little bit more about Paul struggling with what has happened, or, trying to reconcile what's happened. But that makes sense. I don't know that that's what the film is going to be. We'll see.
Yeah.
But let's jump into performances and talk about Timothée Chalamet, who plays Paul Atreides, of course. I mean, I know that you've gone off him, Sinclair, since he started dating the Kardashian or the Jenner. But as an actor, we all love him and have loved him.
Yeah.
And he had so much more to do in this film.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he's more of an adult in this film. Yeah. Like both as a character and an actor. Yeah. But like going back and watching the first one today, I'm like, oh, he's like a little teenager.
Yeah.
In that first movie. And now he's a man. Like now he's taking control.
Honestly, I didn't know that he had that in him. Like, even in The King, he plays like a boy king. But in the second, in the latter half of this film, when he's actually, after he drinks the potion and he like comes into his own and he sort of accepts his fate as the leader, he's commanding in a way that I was super impressed by.
Yeah. It's like, Paul is trying to convince the Fremens, but like Timothy has to convince the audience.
Yes.
You know, like it's coming from both sides there.
But he succeeded
there's a lot
for
of
me.
People that can't buy into him being tough in any way, But he's great in this. Like I think that he really, really brought it, and I believed him in those moments. And I think that he had real gravitas in this. He did.
That scene when he's like amongst the Fremen in their temple or whatever, and he gets up and speaks to someone, he says, "There's no one in this room who can stand against me." It's actually horrifying. And then when he points out the one guy and he starts talking about his grandmother, that was like, I had goosebumps. Like he really held all of that power. It was super impressive. Yeah.
But I mean, the best part is that Chani is looking at him kind of like, I don't know, dude.
Yeah, she goes off him then. She's like, this is not the man I fell in love with.
Totally. She's wonderful.
Yeah, she really is.
And she has like such a good, I love that they ended the movie on her. I think that was a really, really good choice, because basically he decides he's going to marry the princess.
Yeah.
And they're going to rule. And essentially in the book, he's like, well, Chani, yeah, you could be my concubine. Like, you could be my side piece.
Yeah.
Basically. Like, what? That's what happens to her? She gets to be the side piece?
Well,
Like
but this is what I mean.
And
Like,
he's like, I won't love her, I'll love you, but I gotta do
Right.
this. But at the end of the movie, she gets a really great moment of riding away. And we don't know.
yeah, I can't imagine. This is what I was saying earlier about the relationship. It's like, she's not going to be his concubine. Like, I don't see how that works for that character as it has been portrayed in the film.
Yeah.
And I think that she also, she was only really introduced a bit in the first film, so it's kind of obvious to say that she had way more to do in this one. But like, she really did. She was the like calm, warm, like powerful center of this film. I really liked Zendaya in this a lot.
And there's a lot of quiet energy happening and quiet acting that still portrays so much. Like, it's not a showy performance at all.
One that might be slightly showy, but was my favorite performance in this film is Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah,
as Reverend Mother.
She's so good.
Yeah.
Man,
She's so good. And we still don't really know about Lady Jessica. Like, Lady
Perfect.
Jessica, I don't know about you. You
I
can
know.
see Lady Jessica going evil.
Yeah.
totally.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
and that's like the beauty of it, because you don't really, she's still kind of with the Bene Gesserits, but also not. She's
And
pushing her son, but she wants the best for her son. She's such an ambiguous character. She's so morally ambiguous, and she's so interesting. And her costume, just incredible.
And her face, the
I
way
know.
that she can be so steely. The scene
Yeah.
when she takes the worm blood and she's like dying. I felt it. Oh, I just think that she's incredible in this.
We've
Like,
called it
incredible.
worm blood, worm piss, worm poison. Like, it's got just become every substance.
Yeah.
Blue raspberry
Kool-Aid.
Gatorade.
I really loved Florence Pugh too.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think also having her voice as the narrator in the beginning and throughout, she has that deep, raspy voice
She's
that,
got a perfect voice. Yeah.
yeah, that really lends itself to narration.
Yeah.
But she, again, too, like, has so much intensity in her
Yeah.
face, and you see that she understands
Yeah.
her role and the consequences of all these things that are happening around her. And I really have to say that, like, these are all incredible actors, but obviously they're being directed pitch perfectly by Denis Villeneuve to convey the tone that comes through. Like,
It's so consistent
Yeah, it really is.
across all of them. They're all in the same film, and
Yeah.
whenever we watch movies, it's especially with a huge ensemble cast like this, there's always a couple that kind of stick out as being like in a different movie kind of. And you're so right, Helen. Like, the direction was clearly like they all got it. They all knew
Yeah.
exactly where they were and what they were doing.
Yeah.
This was like really one of the first times I've watched a movie and been like, okay, this is the new generation of movie stars.
100%.
Like, this is it.
100%.
Like, this with the press tour, all the fashion looks that go along with this, them promoting the movie. This is really the first film where you feel the power of a new group of movie stars. I have not felt
like
that.
capital M, capital S,
Yeah.
like movie stars. Yes.
Yeah.
All of them. Austin Butler too, who, you're right, is largely unrecognizable, but like, he's really, really good.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where this guy emerged. Honestly, I thought he was like a like Nickelodeon kid or something. I had no idea who he was, or like a TikToker. And then suddenly he was Elvis. I was like, oh, he was actually great in that. I had no idea where he came from. And then he's like, excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obscenely beautiful.
Yeah.
Even with no
absurd.
eyebrows and no hair.
Yeah.
And as a complete psychopath. Like, still nonetheless, I was like, I probably would.
Just, slicing his concubines' necks and
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Let's talk about technical.
I mean, everything perfect. What's the
Right, I know.
podcast done?
Yeah.
Everything just completely perfect. This is just this movie is a gift. I'm just going to say this. Don't take this movie for granted. Don't take this for granted, because this is an experience that doesn't come along too often. I feel like the last big sci-fi epic that I was just so wowed by was Blade Runner 2049 in the theater. Like, and in between these movies, we get these really half-ass, horrible-looking sci-fi movies with no story, and I think we've been so bombarded by Marvel movies to the point where I'm like, man, everything looks bad now.
Yeah.
CGI looks bad. We've gotten so advanced, and somehow things look worse.
Yeah.
And so when you see this, you're like, I don't know why anyone would even bother making a movie ever after. How can you compare yourself to this?
Yeah.
And
it was like,
obviously this has CGI, but they're on actual location. There's so many practical effects that are used in this that the CGI they do use is so seamless.
Yeah.
Within it.
Well, and also I read an interview with Greg Fraser, who's the cinematographer for this, who also did the Batman and was incredible in that, and the first Dune. But he talked about this crazy process where they shot the whole film on digital and then transferred it to film and then scanned it to digital.
Wow.
I have no idea. I don't have enough of a technical understanding to know what that did. But what I will say is that a lot of the times when you watch like something that's super CGI heavy or super digital, like any of the Marvel films or whatever, you can like tell. It's like our eyes know.
Yeah.
So whatever this process was, it seemed to make it more real looking.
I read that they used black and white infrared cameras for the gladiator scene.
Oh wow.
Which, like, I don't really know what that means, but it sounds cool.
and it worked.
And it looked really cool.
And it looked good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
just
mean,
the production design, like it truly feels like another world that we have discovered.
Yes.
Like it doesn't feel like a movie. It doesn't feel fake. It feels like, oh, this is real.
Yeah. And I have to talk about the sound design on this. I mean, I don't know how a film could do it better. Honestly, we talked about the zone of interest and sound being so important in that film. And it is in a totally different way, obviously. This film utilizes sound, the score, the organic sounds, the design of it. Sometimes it's jarring. It's so insanely powerful at every moment, and it heightens every single scene. It drives the story. When I left this movie, I had to drive about 2 hours home because I was going up to my hometown, and it was like pissing rain, and I just played the score again the whole time on the drive for like that whole 2 hours, and I was as loud as it could go, and I was in absolute heaven. It's like, I don't know, this is just insane. Technically you're right, we should have just left it at it's perfect. End of podcast.
Yeah Truly.
The costumes too, these beautiful like intergalactic goth, oh man, it's just incredible. And it's also been so prominent in their promotion of this movie. It's such a it's just a feast. Like, I honestly, Florence Pugh in this one, I was like, her costuming is amazing.
Yeah. I loved her like headpieces and everything.
And you're right, with the Fremen and stuff too. It's like it's a really cool looking costume, but it also, you just believe and can see how entirely functional it is.
Yeah. And it's all practical. There's like a reason why they wear what they wear. It's not just to look cool. It's like there is practical application behind it. And so cool.
Okay, what is the last word? Because I feel like we could just talk about them. We probably will continue talking about it. But like, what is the last word on Dune Part 2, Helen?
This made me love Dune more. This made me want to eat up all this content. It actually made me want to read the book. I probably won't, because I know I would hate it. It's not for me, but
No, you will not like the book.
I know I won't be able to do it, but but it gave me that feeling of like, I need to know everything about this world, because this movie sucked me in like a worm butthole.
Imagine that it actually is their butthole. It's Shia LaBeouf's butthole and not his mouth. I mean, it kind of looks like it, but
Yeah.
like that's the whole film. We're like, actually, guys, he's just like
Yeah.
sucking you in his butthole.
Reverse digestion.
Yeah.
Okay, what about you, Edison? What's your last word?
Yeah, this film just like totally blew my mind. As I said, I had super high expectations. It surpassed them. I saw it at the IMAX. I would recommend anybody who's going to watch this movie, do not wait for this to come on your television.
Yeah.
Rush immediately to the largest format that you could possibly watch it, and then go watch it again. I watched it twice in 1 week. And
Yeah.
you know what? I'll probably go a third time before it leaves theater. I'm obsessed. I
Yeah.
loved it. Loved it. Completely obsessed. Sinclair?
Just don't take this movie for granted. Don't take this experience for granted. I think it's so rare movies look this good. Just treat this like a amazing visual theater experience. Get swept up in this world and just enjoy yourself, because this movie's fucking cool. Just open yourself up to it. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another episode of Talk Movie to Me. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email is talkmovietome@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram @talkmovietome. Rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And season 7 episodes are on YouTube @Talk Movie to Me Podcast. I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair. And that's Edison.